You ever find yourself in a moment so wildly unexpected that you start questioning every life choice that led you right into it? Well, that was me. One blazing summer Saturday at this quaint little wedding venue out in the middle of nowhere. Picture a soft breeze, white folding chairs lined up perfectly on a patch of green, and this crowd buzzing with that mix of excitement and nerves that only weddings have. And then there's me standing smack in the middle of it all, looking like someone just handed me the wrong clothes and told me to play along. The bride, staring at me with this open-mouthed, "Are you serious?" kind of shock that made me wish the ground would swallow me whole. Jake, my best friend and the groom, was standing there too, completely speechless. His usual confident grin was gone, replaced by this look that said, "How did my best man turn into a walking disaster?" And all around us, people were staring like I was a magician who accidentally pulled the wrong rabbit out of the hat, or maybe the guy who's crashed the party and forgot his invitation. I mean, honestly, what was I even doing there? How the hell did I end up crashing Jake's wedding, his own wedding, without so much as a, "Hey buddy, you're not on the list"? Every nerve in my body screamed for me to disappear, but somehow I was rooted in place, caught in this weird, awkward bubble of confusion and embarrassment. And yet here I was, wondering how the perfect day for my best friend had taken such a wild detour, all thanks to me. It wasn't like I just strolled in off the street either. No, there was a whole bizarre backstory tangled up in miscommunications, mix-ups, and, honestly, a little bit of hope, and we'll get to that. But in that moment, with everyone's eyes on me and reality sinking in, I knew one thing for sure. This day was not going how anyone expected. The real question was whether I could somehow make it out of this mess without losing a friend, or maybe a lot more. So, let me backtrack a bit and explain how I got tangled in this whole wedding mess with Jake and, well, Sarah, because that's where things get, interesting. Jake and I have been best friends forever, right? We grew up practically next door to each other in this tiny town where everyone knows your business and then some. I mean, I was there for all the big moments, the first heartbreak, the terrible haircut phase, and yeah, the epic fantasy football tragedies. So when Jake told me he was getting married to Emma, I was genuinely happy for him. He'd been with Emma for a few years, and they seemed solid. Then there's Sarah. Now, Sarah and I go way back too, but not quite the best friend level, more like longtime crush who thinks I'm just a guy from down the street. She's smart, funny, and the kind of person who can light up a room just by walking in. For as many years as I'd known her, I'd never quite worked up the nerve to tell her how I felt, so when she texted me, "Hey, you coming to Jake's wedding?" I kind of freaked out, mostly in a good way, I thought. But here's the kicker. Sarah was one of the bridesmaids. So, naturally, I assumed, since she was in the bridal party and had invited me, I was, also officially on the guest list. Never bothered to double check because, honestly, who does that with your longtime crush? I mean, you think she'd be on top of the guest list, right? Wrong. It turns out the invitation I got was, well, let's call it a glorified heads up. Apparently, Emma's family did the whole thing super traditionally, sending out printed invitations in alphabetical order months ago. Jake and I? We never double-checked the list, it was all their domain. And in the chaos of bridesmaids coordinating dresses and groomsmen suits, someone, probably in a panic over last-minute RSVPs, forwarded Sarah a +1 invitation off a separate list. Sarah assumed it was for me. I assumed I was golden. So there I was, thinking I was the best man, or at least an official part of the day, showing up dressed decent enough to blend in but with zero clue about where I was supposed to be or when. It's like being dropped into a play you never rehearsed for, and no, you can't just improv your way out of a surprise wedding gig. This whole mix-up set the stage, right? Because suddenly, the person I'm supposed to have a big role in the day, Jake, is staring at me like I just crashed his life's biggest event. "Sarah?" She gave me this half smile that was both, "Really?" and, "Well, this is awkward," which, honestly, was way worse than pure annoyance. She's got that look that says she wants to help but can't decide whether to laugh or throw a drink at you. And then there's the bigger problem, Mark. The wedding coordinator. I'm telling you, this guy has the kind of glare like you just interrupted his personal nightmare. If wedding planning was a battlefield, Mark was some sort of general who's lost all patience with idiots wandering into his carefully orchestrated chaos. Now the stakes were clear. One wrong move, and this mix-up could blow up in my face. We're not just talking about me standing awkwardly at the wrong table. This could mean losing Jake's trust and ruining what had always been the best friendship I thought I had. There was also that ugly possibility of Sarah never even looking at me the same way again because apparently crashing a wedding is not on anyone's charm list. So yeah, that's the tangled web I'd caught myself in, best friend confused, crush amused but annoyed, and a fire-breathing coordinator who clearly needed an adult, not a clueless guest accidentally wandering in. The whole thing felt like one of those bad dreams where you show up naked to school, except here I was, just awkwardly out of place in a sea of well-dressed people who actually belonged. And the crazy part? I was just at the very start of what was about to become the weirdest, most uncomfortable, and honestly kind of hilarious day of my life. Alright, so here I was, stuck in the middle of a sea of impeccably dressed wedding guests, trying my best to act like I knew what was going on, which, spoiler alert, I did not. I mean, how hard could it be, right? Just smile, nod when appropriate, maybe shuffle along to the buffet at the right moment. Simple. But no, it wasn't simple. The first snag hit almost immediately. I figured I'd try to sneak over to where Sarah was, somehow hoping she'd throw me a lifeline or at least a knowing wink. Except, as I approached, she caught sight of me and raised a perfectly arched eyebrow that screamed, "What the hell are you doing here?" Hey, Sarah, I stammered, desperately trying to play it cool. I was just, checking out the venue from the inside. She gave me this look that mixed amusement and, honestly, a little bit of exasperation. You do realize this isn't some open house, right? It's Jake and Emma's wedding. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm here, I said, feeling like I was digging myself into a deeper hole with every word. Oh, really? Because last I checked, the groom's best man was Mark over there being yelled at by the caterers, not some random guy standing by the punch bowl like he's auditioning for a role, she teased, nudging me gently. Come on, you can't just show up and act like you belong. I laughed awkwardly, realizing my attempts at blending were utterly failing. But before I could respond, a shadow loomed over us. Mark, the wedding coordinator, and, oh boy, his glare could have melted steel. Excuse me, Mark said, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. You. Yes, you, in the whatever that is you're wearing. This is a private event. Yeah, I managed, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked somewhere in the middle. I'm here with Jake. Best friend. Mark's eyes narrowed like I'd personally insulted his mother. Best friend? Then why have I never been informed about this best friend showing up unannounced? Well, it's kind of a long story. There was a mix-up with the invitations, I said, hoping explanation might diffuse the situation. Mark shook his head, looking like I'd just told him weddings were a hoax. Look, buddy, I don't know what circus you stumbled out of, but back off before I show you the exit myself. The flicker of panic was in full bloom now. I was this close to being shepherded out by a guy who clearly hadn't slept in weeks and probably hated his job as much as I hated my current life choices. Just as I was debating whether to make a run for it or just hunker down and pretend I was a decorative shrub, a voice from behind us cut through the tension. Mark, hold on. I turned and there was Emma, the bride, looking surprisingly calm. She gave me a quick once-over, then looked back at Mark with a raised hand like she was about to deliver a ceasefire order. Is this the guy who's been causing the commotion? She asked, eyebrows knitting together. That would be him, Mark said, his voice dripping with disbelief. Emma's expression softened a bit. Okay, so here's what happened. This isn't exactly the right date on the invitation, and the guest list is sorted out, but I think there was a mistake with plus ones. Sarah thought, and maybe I did too that he was coming. I blinked. Wait, so I'm not officially on the list, but I'm not exactly unwelcome? Emma smiled gently. Not exactly. The relief that washed over me might have been visible because Sarah shot me a quick smirk, obviously enjoying this unexpected turn of events. All right, Emma said, turning to Mark. Let's just make this work. I don't want any more stress today, okay? Mark exhaled heavily and nodded, though I swear he was still trying to figure out how to discreetly boot me without causing a scene. Suddenly, I was no longer the outsider, but also not quite part of the plan. Somewhere between unwelcome guest and accidental hero. Sarah came over and whispered, "Guess you're staying, don't screw it up." I just hoped I wouldn't. So here I am, accidentally invited but still very much unplanned for, standing in this strangely elevated middle ground between crashing the wedding and sort of guest. Emma's intervention had pulled me back from the brink of social exile, and Mark's glare softened just enough to signal a ceasefire. Honestly, that was more than I deserved, given how much chaos I'd already stirred up like a bull in a china shop. The next couple of hours were a blur of trying not to ruin the vibe further. Somehow, I ended up being the unofficial usher leading a few guests who'd wandered off back to their seats, holding babies whose parents were otherwise occupied and offering my surprisingly mediocre dance moves to lighten the mood. I'd never seen Jake smile so widely since the early days of high school, and for once, Sarah wasn't rolling her eyes at my presence but actually cracking a few jokes and even asking me to fetch her a glass of water more than once. Progress, I think. Then came the one moment that flipped the whole chaotic script on its head. About midway through the speeches, the microphone went dead, like, seriously dead. No amount of fiddling brought it back. Cue a collective groan from the crowd and Mark frantically signaling for a backup plan. Without thinking, I jumped up, tapped into some random tech memory from a part-time job years ago, and managed to rig a quick fix with a borrowed speaker and an extra battery I found lurking behind the DJ booth. The silence broke into cheers, and Jake caught my eye with this look that said, "Bro, you saved the day." Even Emma gave me a nod that felt oddly approving. Mark, who had been pacing like a caged lion, actually cracked a grin like maybe this accidental guest had grown on him a little. After the wedding dance eventually kicked off, I found a quiet moment with Jake. We clinked glasses and he said, "Man, you really went from zero to hero today. I owe you one, or like 10. I laughed, the tension finally melting away. "Just don't make me your best man next time without telling me first." Jake grinned and punched my shoulder lightly. "Deal." And then, Sarah, we ended up sitting together during the cake cutting, and for once, the nervous energy between us felt less like a minefield and more like a bridge. She looked at me over her slice of cake and said, "You know, for the guy who crashed a wedding, you did okay. Maybe next time just don't crash it at all?" I shook my head, partly in disbelief, partly in relief. Yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll just stick to crashing less important parties from now on. Looking back, that day was a weird cocktail of embarrassing mistakes and unexpected triumphs. It taught me something about friendship, that sometimes it bends and stretches but doesn't necessarily break. About Sarah, that sometimes the long-running awkwardness between two people can just flip into something genuine with the right nudge. And about myself, well, that no matter how much you think you're out of place, there's often a way to make your own kind of space. So, if you've ever found yourself in a moment that spiraled way beyond your control, especially at someone else's big day, maybe you'll get where I'm coming from. Because as much as I wanted to disappear into the nearest shrub that day, I'm kinda glad I didn't. What would you have done if you showed up to a wedding and realized you weren't supposed to be there? Would you make a run for it? Or try to fix your way into the story? Honestly, I'd love to hear your version because, well, lodging yourself in other people's weddings wasn't exactly on my life plan. But hey, at least it makes for one hell of a story.